Hello and welcome. Today, we are diving into a question that has been at the heart of Christianity for, 2,000 years. It's this deep tension between faith and money. We're going to break down the whole complex relationship, and we'll frame this as a review to really help you lock in the key arguments. So let's get right to it. The entire debate, really, it all comes down to this one big question. Is wealth a sign of God's favor? Something you should actually try to get? Or is it a spiritual trap, something that distracts you from what really matters? Getting a handle on both sides of this argument is absolutely essential. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll define the core problem. Then we'll look at the two classic approaches, renunciation and stewardship. From there, we'll jump into the more modern and controversial prosperity gospel, compare all the different views, and then wrap it all up with a final summary. Okay, first things first. Before we can really get into the arguments, we've got to get on the same page about the two big opposing ideas at the center of this whole thing. So, let's define our terms. So, on one side, you've got asceticism. Think of this as the path of saying no to worldly things. The whole idea is that by giving up material comforts, by fasting, or literally getting rid of your stuff, you can get closer to God without all the noise and distraction. This is the mindset of, say, the early desert monks or certain monastic orders. And then, on the complete other side, you have stewardship. Now, this view doesn't see wealth as bad at all. Instead, it sees it as a major responsibility. The thinking here is that, hey, everything we have, our money, our property, it all ultimately belongs to God. Our job is just to manage it responsibly and use it for the good of everyone else. All right, let's dig into that first major argument, the path of renunciation. This perspective really leans into the parts of the Bible that paint wealth as a serious spiritual danger. Okay, this quote is a big one, and you have to imagine just how shocking this statement from Jesus would have sounded. He's talking to a crowd that probably saw wealth as a sign that God's liked you, and he hits them with this completely wild, over-the-top image. It would have been incredibly unsettling. So here's the key takeaway. The passage is basically saying that money can be a huge roadblock to following God. It forces you to choose your loyalty. Remember, the rich man in the story walked away sad. Why? Because his stuff had a hold on him, and it was keeping him from what Jesus was offering. And listen, this isn't just a one-time thing. Over in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is even more direct. It's not just a warning about how hard it is to be rich. It's a straight-up command to get rid of your earthly things. And this really gets to the heart of the ascetic view. It's all about priorities. Your earthly treasures, they're temporary, right? They can rust, they can be stolen. So the focus should be on building a treasure in heaven, something that's permanent, something with real eternal value. Now let's look at another really famous warning, this time from one of the letters in the New Testament. And you want to pay close attention here because this one adds a really important twist to the whole conversation. See, the crucial point here, and this is a super important distinction, is that money itself isn't the evil thing. It's the love of money. It's greed. That eagerness to get rich is what pulls people away from their faith. It's a subtle difference, but it's a huge one. The problem isn't the asset, it's the attitude. Okay, so we've heard one side. Now let's completely switch gears and look at the other major Christian tradition. This is the path of stewardship, which argues that wealth isn't a danger to run from, but actually a tool God gives us to use. And this idea goes way, way back. You can see it clearly here in the Old Testament book of Proverbs. Wealth is tied directly to this moral duty to take care of people who are struggling. Using what you have to help those in need isn't just a nice thing to do. It's seen as an act that directly honors God. And if you want a perfect, practical example of stewardship, look no further than John Wesley. This 18th century theologian came up with this really simple but powerful three-step plan. Notice the balance here. There's nothing wrong with making money, but the whole point of making it and saving it is aimed at that final step, giving it all away. It's a complete system for being responsible with your wealth. All right, so now we fast forward to a much more modern and, let's be honest, way more controversial take on all of this, the prosperity gospel. So the prosperity gospel, which is sometimes called the word faith movement, it teaches that believers have a right to be rich and healthy. The idea is that you can unlock these blessings through a few key actions, speaking your wealth into existence, that's called positive confession, and by giving money to your church, which is often called sowing a seed for a bigger financial return later. But as you can imagine, this view gets a lot of pushback. Biblical scholar Craig Blomberg, for example, lays out three huge problems. First, he says the Old Testament promises of wealth were for the whole nation of Israel, not for specific people based on how much faith they had. Second, you can't just copy and paste those promises onto modern countries. And third, and this is the big one, the New Testament just never promises anyone that they'll get rich if they have enough faith. This is where it gets really helpful, especially if you're studying this. Let's put traditional stewardship and the prosperity gospel right next to each other. Seeing them side by side makes the differences crystal clear. Let's just walk through this. In stewardship, wealth is a tool you manage for God. In the prosperity gospel, it's a right you can claim. Stewardship says wealth comes from God and hard work. The prosperity gospel says it comes from faith and what you say. And look at the purpose of giving. In one, it's to help others. In the other, it's often an investment for a personal return. And their views on suffering, they could not be more different. Okay, time to bring it all home. Let's pull everything together into one final summary. Seriously, think of this next slide as your ultimate cheat sheet for this whole topic. So on one side, you have the wealth as a blessing camp. They'll point to the fact that many Old Testament heroes were rich, that God's covenant included material blessings, and hey, you can't be generous if you don't have anything to give, right? But on the other side, the wealth as a danger team points straight to Jesus' own words, the camel and the needle, the command to sell everything, and to the warnings that loving money and worrying about it will just pull you away from God. And that leaves us right here with this final question. This isn't about finding one simple, easy answer. It's about recognizing this constant tension. For any believer trying to figure this out today, it's a constant balancing act, weighing that call to be a responsible manager against those very real warnings about the power of materialism. So, where do you think that balance lies?